The chamber was silent when a human diplomat walked in. Every alien eye followed him, waiting for a mistake, waiting for a slip that could prove humanity was not ready for the stars. The air inside the council hall was heavy with pride and arrogance. The rulers of the galaxy sat upon their tall seats carved from shining metals and living stone, and they gazed down with cold eyes, believing they were above all other life. The Galactic Council had summoned humanity for judgment. They called it a trial. But in truth, it was a stage meant to show the galaxy that humans were nothing more than reckless children who had stumbled too far too fast into the stars. The Council wanted to remind them of their place, to break their spirit before it could grow stronger, and they gathered here with smiles that hid their sharp teeth and cruel thoughts. The human walked with calm steps, the sound of his shoes echoing on the polished floor. He wore no armor, no weapons, only a black suit, plain and simple, yet it carried a weight heavier than steel. He did not bow his head, nor did he look away. His eyes swept across the chamber as if he were the judge and not the judged, and that unsettled many of the aliens who watched from their thrones. They whispered among themselves, voices buzzing in many tongues, clicking mandibles, hissing breaths, deep growls, and soft echoes, all carrying the same thought. He is just one man. He cannot harm us. He stands alone against empires that have lasted for ages. What can one fragile human do? Yet beneath those whispers there was unease, for they could not understand the strange calm that wrapped around him like a shadow. The hall itself was built to intimidate. Massive pillars of crystal reaching high above, banners of alien houses stretched across the walls. The lights shimmered with shifting colors that bent around the council thrones, and at the center of it all stood the human, small compared to the titans that surrounded him. Yet he did not shrink, he did not tremble, he did not bend. Instead, he stood like a stone that would not move. The council planned to test him, to humiliate him. They would strip his words of power, twist his answers, drown him in laws written long before humanity took to the skies. They would make him bow or make him break, and they expected the rest of humanity to see this trial and understand that resistance was useless, that Earth was nothing more than dust beneath the boots of the Council. The alien leader, a towering figure of scaled flesh and golden armor, leaned forward, his eyes like burning coals. He had ruled for centuries, crushed rebellions, silenced voices, and bent nations with nothing but his will. To him, this human was not a diplomat, but a sacrifice, a display to remind the galaxy of who held the chain. His lips curled in a smile that carried no warmth, only the hunger of power. But even before he spoke, a strange tension filled the hall. Many could feel it, but could not explain it. It was not the kind of power that came from weapons or armies. It was not energy that could be measured. It was something else, something in a way the human's eyes did not waver, in the way his steps had not faltered, in the way his silence felt louder than the boasts of kings. The alien leader rose slowly, the sound of his armor grinding like thunder. The chamber grew darker, as if the lights themselves bent to his shadow. He looked down at the lone human and let his voice cut through the silence. "Human, today you will learn your place in this galaxy." The words echoed across the walls, heavy and sharp, meant to strike fear, meant to crush hope, meant to end any dream of defiance. Yet the human did not move, he did not bow, he did not even blink. He simply stood there, and the silence that followed was not weakness. It was a silence that spoke louder than any roar. It was the silence of storm waiting beyond the horizon, unseen but unstoppable. And though none in the chamber admitted it, a chill ran through them all, for in that silence they felt something they could not name. The alien guards moved closer, their heavy steps shaking the polished floor, their weapons glowing with cold blue fire. The sound of their armor echoed across the chamber as every council member leaned forward to watch, their eyes hungry for a show. They wanted the human diplomat to break, to bend, to fall to his knees and beg for mercy. They wanted the galaxy to see that humanity was weak. The alien leader's words still hung in the air, sharp as blades, and the guards obeyed without question. Their orders were clear. They were to strip the human of his dignity. They were to show that no outsider could stand tall in front of the Galactic Council. They would turn him into nothing more than a frightened animal before the eyes of the universe. The council chamber filled with whispers. Some laughed softly. Others hissed their amusement. Many leaned back in comfort, certain of the outcome, for in their eyes there was no question. One fragile human could not stand against the weight of empires. One man could not resist the ancient authority that ruled the stars for thousands of years. It was impossible, yet the human stood still, his hands calm at his sides, his face unreadable, his eyes sharp and cold. They demanded the human surrender Earth's independence. They spoke with voices thick with arrogance, saying humanity was reckless, saying humanity was violent, saying humanity was unfit to rule itself. They claimed humans were too dangerous to be free, that they must kneel under the order of the council, for only then could they be controlled. Only then could they be useful. The words spread like poison through the chamber, and the crowd cheered them on. Still, the human diplomat did not falter. He remained like stone, unshaken by their voices. His calmness was strange, unnerving, and some of the counselors began to feel a small seed of unease growing within them. They expected anger. They expected fear. They expected a plea, but they received none. Instead, they received silence, and that silence carried a weight that none could measure. The guards moved closer, their weapons raised, their armor shining with sharp reflections. The energy within their blades hummed with deadly promise. The aliens in the chamber watched with wide eyes, some whispering predictions of how quickly the human would be dragged away, how soon his body would collapse under the force of alien power, how swiftly the proud envoy would be broken in front of the galaxy. The human spoke at last, his voice steady, low, and cold. It carried no fear, no tremor, no hesitation. Instead, it carried something far heavier, something the guards felt deep inside their bones. "If you touch me, you will not leave this hall alive." The words were simple, plain, yet they cut through the air like a blade of ice. The silence that followed was sharper than the loudest scream. Laughter erupted from the council seats. Deep roars, shrill cries, clicking and hissing, all filled with amusement. They laughed because to them it was absurd, it was madness. How could one man threaten an entire chamber filled with warriors, soldiers, and leaders of empires? How could flesh and bone defy the might of countless species? They laughed because they believed themselves untouchable. They laughed because arrogance was their armor. But within that laughter, within the shaking walls of pride, there was a thin thread of unease. Some of the counselors had seen the way the human stood. They had felt the chill in his words. They had seen eyes that did not belong to prey, but to a predator waiting for the right moment. Yet the laughter drowned them out. Pride always drowned warning, and the guards did not stop. They kept moving forward. The human diplomat stayed perfectly still, his calm expression unchanged, his eyes locked on the guards as they raised their weapons higher, closer, ready to strike. The chamber shook with anticipation. The crowd leaned forward to watch the final moment, to see the fragile man fall. But instead of fear, they saw something else, something far worse. They saw the faintest hint of a smile. The alien leader rose higher in his throne, spreading his clawed hands to silence the chamber. His voice rang like thunder. "You dare threaten the council. You dare threaten the rulers of the galaxy. You dare think yourself more than an insect beneath our feet." His words boomed, filling the hall with the weight of command. The guards stood taller, ready to strike at his order. The crowd cheered louder, certain of the end. Yet the human's voice cut through again, calm as stone, sharp as a knife. "I came here to speak for peace, but you choose war. And if war is what you choose, then know this: humanity does not fear war. Humanity was born in it, shaped by it. And if you strike us, you will learn what it means to awaken death itself." His words echoed, and every heart in the chamber skipped a beat. The guards froze for a moment, their hands trembling though they did not know why. The crowd went silent, the laughter died, and in that sudden silence the weight of his words pressed down on all who listened. Some could not understand why their chests grew tight, why their breath slowed, why the hall suddenly felt colder, but deep inside they knew. Instinct screamed a warning they had never felt before. Still the leader gave the order, his voice cracking with rage. "Seize him, Tear him down. Let all see his weakness." And the guards moved as commanded, their weapons raised high, their eyes burning with determination. But as they stepped forward, a strange pressure filled the chamber, heavy and suffocating, like a storm gathering unseen, pressing down on every soul present, and the guards felt their legs grow weak. The human did not move, he did not raise his hand, he did not lift a weapon. Yet the energy in the hall shifted, the air thickened, the shadows stretched longer, the silence grew deeper, and all at once the council realized that something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong, and their pride began to tremble. The guards hesitated, their weapons shaking. The alien leader shouted again, his voice filled with anger to mask his fear. But none could shake the feeling, none could explain the weight that crushed their spirits. And all eyes returned to the human in the black suit, standing alone, standing calm, standing as if the fate of the galaxy meant nothing to him. And in that moment, as silence swallowed the chamber, they understood one truth that chilled their blood. This man was not bluffing. He was not weak. He was not prey. He was something else entirely, something they had never faced before. And when he spoke again, his words carried the weight of death itself. "Touch me, and you will not leave this hall alive." The aliens roared with laughter, their voices crashing against the high walls of the chamber. A storm of pride and mockery filled the air. They laughed because to them the words of one human meant nothing. They laughed because they had crushed worlds, enslaved nations, and broken species without effort. And they believed this man was no different, a fragile creature wrapped in cloth, nothing more than a symbol that would soon be shattered before their eyes. A general from a warrior species stepped forward. His skin was dark like iron and covered in scars that told endless stories of conquest. His tusks curved upward. His eyes glowed with fire. He carried the pride of countless battles on his shoulders. He was known as the breaker of shields, the crusher of armies, the terror of battlefields. And when he stood in front of the human diplomat, the chamber shook with the sound of his heavy steps. The general pointed at the human, and his voice shook the pillars. "You dare speak threats before the council. You dare defy the rulers of the galaxy. I will show them all the truth of your weakness. I will tear the mask from your face and reveal the fragile bones that lie beneath." The crowd erupted with cheers. Claws struck against the railings. Tails slapped against the floor. Wings beat against the air. Every corner of the chamber filled with bloodlust and hunger for a spectacle. Yet the human did not move. He did not flinch. His expression remained calm, his eyes cold and sharp. He stood like a shadow carved into stone, a figure that did not belong in this hall, yet commanded its weight with silent power. The general approached closer, towering above him, his breath hot and foul, his fists like boulders ready to crush. The entire council leaned forward to watch the moment of destruction. The human spoke, his voice steady and quiet, but it cut through the noise as if the universe itself silenced to listen. "You will not touch me." The words carried no force of volume, no shout, no growl, yet they struck the ears of every being in the chamber like a blade of ice. Many shivered, though they did not know why. Even the general paused for a heartbeat, but pride swallowed doubt, and he roared with rage. The warrior raised his hand, his claws gleamed under the shifting lights. He swung with a strength that had crushed armored foes, broken shields, and ended lives without mercy. The council cheered for the strike. They cheered for the fall of the human. They cheered for the proof that no outsider could resist their power. The air itself seemed to split as the claws descended toward the man in the black suit. But then the cheering stopped. The chamber fell silent in a single breath. The general froze mid-strike, his body stiff, his eyes wide with shock. His claws halted inches from the human's face. His muscles trembled. His throat tightened. And suddenly he gasped, his massive form collapsing to the floor, his claws scratching against the polished stone as he clutched at his throat, struggling to breathe. His roars turned to choking cries that echoed through the stunned silence. The human had not moved, not a step, not a hand, not a blink. Yet the strongest warrior in the chamber now writhed at his feet, collapsing like a broken puppet. His eyes rolled in panic, his tusks scraping against the floor as his body twisted in pain. The council members rose from their seats in shock. Whispers turned into cries. Cries turned into screams. Fear rippled through the hall like fire racing across dry fields. Some shouted that it was a trick. Others demanded answers. Many simply stared in disbelief, for never before had they seen a warrior of such strength fall, without a single strike landing upon him. Never before had they witnessed such power and silence. Never before had a single human stood above a general of blood and fire without even lifting a hand. The air grew heavier, the shadows deeper, the silence more suffocating. The human finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, filled with cold fire. "I came here for peace, but you forced me to remind you what humans truly are." His words hung in the air, vibrating in the hearts of all who heard, and the weight of those words crushed arrogance into fear, crushed pride into trembling doubt, crushed the illusion of superiority into a bitter silence that no one dared to break. The fallen general gasped one last time and collapsed into unconsciousness, his massive form lying still upon the polished floor, and the human turned his gaze toward the council, his eyes sharp and unwavering, his presence towering despite his small frame. Many counselors lowered their eyes, unable to meet his stare, their voices caught in their throats, their hands trembling as they gripped their thrones with desperate fear. The alien leader rose again, his face twisted with fury, but his eyes betrayed something darker, a spark of fear that he could not hide. His voice thundered through the chamber, though it no longer carried the same weight. "This is a trick, a deception. No human can hold such power. Explain yourself, or you will be torn apart by the wrath of this council." His words trembled with the anger of a ruler who felt his throne shake beneath him. But the human did not answer immediately. He let the silence stretch. He let the weight of fear grow. He let the truth settle into their hearts like poison. And when he finally spoke, his voice carried no hesitation. "You call this a trick because you do not understand. You call this impossible because you do not know humanity. We are not the strongest. We are not the largest. We are not the oldest. But we're the most dangerous because we never stop. We never break. We never kneel." The council chamber shook not from his voice, but from the silent pressure that seemed to grow heavier with every word. The aliens who once laughed now stared in dread. The ones who once mocked now trembled. The ones who once cheered now prayed silently that his eyes would not fall upon them. For in his calmness they saw a shadow deeper than war, a force that no empire could tame. One counselor whispered in fear, his voice shaking as it slipped into the silence. "This human is death in a suit." And though the words were soft, they spread like fire, echoing in the minds of all present, for none could deny it now. None could resist the truth. They had challenged a human diplomat, and in return they had awoken something far worse than war. They had awoken the shadow of death itself. The chamber was silent, yet the silence was heavier than any roar. It pressed upon the hearts of every council member like a weight they could not bear. They stared at the human diplomat standing calm and unshaken, his black suit plain, yet darker than any shadow in the room. And they remembered the general who only moments ago lay unconscious at his feet, a warrior who had never known defeat until today, until now. Until this fragile-looking human unmade him without raising a hand. The counselors shifted uneasily. Their proud thrones suddenly felt cold. Their banners no longer carried pride but shame. Whispers rushed like insects crawling across stone, each voice filled with fear, disbelief, and questions. What was this man? What was humanity? How could such a young species carry such hidden weight? Yet none dared to speak the question aloud, for the answer was already spreading like fire in their hearts. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was something far more dangerous. The human let his gaze sweep across the chamber, his eyes sharp as blades though his face remained calm. His silence was not weakness. It was the silence of a storm before the lightning, a silence that made every heart tremble with dread. And then he spoke, his voice low, steady, and filled with cold truth. "You call us reckless, you call us violent, you call us unfit, yet you do not know what we are, you do not know what we have endured, you do not know what built us." His words echoed, each one like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples of fear through the chamber. He stepped forward once. Only a single step. Yet the sound struck like thunder, and his presence grew heavier. His voice carried again. We are a species born in fire, raised in struggle. We are children of war, and war has never left us. It has shaped us. It has carved our bones. It has burned into our blood, and it is written into every breath we take. The counselors leaned back in their thrones, their bodies stiff, their eyes wide, for his words carried something greater than threats. They carried history, a history carved in blood and survival. The human diplomat raised his hand slowly, not as a weapon, but as a gesture of truth. Long before we reached the stars, we fought each other, tribe against tribe, nation against nation, brother against brother. We built weapons that could end cities. We built fire that could turn the sky black. We killed, and we died, and still we rose. The chamber trembled with his words. The alien leaders felt a chill in their veins, for they understood the meaning. Humanity was not shaped by peace, not softened by comfort, but hardened by endless conflict. The human's voice grew colder, yet carried sorrow. We do not fight for glory. We do not fight for conquest. We fight because we must, because survival demanded it, because if we did not fight, we would die. And so we learned, so we adapted, so we became what you see before you. One of the counselors hissed, his voice breaking the silence, though it carried no strength. You speak of war as if it is a virtue. You speak as if violence makes you strong, but it only makes you dangerous. It only proves you cannot be trusted. His words echoed weakly, and the human diplomat turned his gaze upon him. Eyes so sharp the counselor lowered his head in shame before the human even spoke. The human answered with a calm voice that struck deeper than any roar. Yes, we are dangerous. Yes, we are violent, but it is because we know death more closely than any of you. It is because we have faced it not once, not twice, but countless times, and still we rise, still we endure, still we build from the ashes. Do you know what it means to fight a war that ends the world and yet rebuild upon its ruins? We do, and that is why you should fear us. The chamber fell quiet again, the weight of his words heavy as chains around their throats. Images filled their minds, though none had seen Earth's past. They imagined fire-consuming cities, skies filled with smoke, oceans boiling with blood, and still humans walking forward through ruin with unbroken resolve. They realized that this was not a species that fled from death. This was a species that looked into the eyes of death and learned to walk beside it. Another leader shouted, his voice trembling though he tried to mask it with rage. You speak only of destruction, of ashes, of war. How can a species built on death speak of peace? How can you expect us to believe that you come here seeking harmony and not conquest? His words carried the fear that now gripped many, and all eyes turned to the human for the answer. The diplomat raised his head, his face calm though his eyes burned like coals, his voice steady and clear. Because we know what conquest brings, because we know what ashes taste like, because we know the price of blood better than any of you. We come not to conquer, but to stand free. We come not to chain, but to break the chains placed upon us. We come not to destroy, but to warn you. Do not force us into the fire again, for if you do, this galaxy will burn with us. His words carved through the chamber, leaving no room for laughter, no room for denial, only fear and silence. The counselors shifted in their seats, their hands tightened upon their thrones, their eyes filled with shadows of doubt and dread. They began to understand that peace with humanity was not weakness, but survival. For if they pushed humanity into a corner, they would awaken something even the stars themselves would tremble to face. One counselor leaned to another and whispered, though the whisper spread through many ears. This human speaks as if he has lived 1,000 wars, as if death walks beside him, as if he carries the ghosts of his people with him into this chamber. And the other could only nod, for the truth was plain. The human diplomat was not only a man in a suit, he was a voice for billions who carried the same fire, the same endurance, the same unyielding spirit. The alien leader clenched his fists, his golden armor gleaming under the shifting light, his pride wounded, his authority shaken. His voice thundered again, though now it trembled beneath its weight. You threaten us with stories, with shadows, with your endless wars, but we are the council. We rule the stars. We cannot be broken by words. His roar shook the chamber, yet it no longer carried the same certainty. It sounded more like a plea than a command. The human took another step forward, his calm face unchanged, his voice colder than before. Then you will see that my words are not shadows. They are truth, they are history, and they will become your future if you force our hand. You do not believe because you cannot imagine, but I tell you this, humanity is the deadliest force you will ever face. Not because we seek it, but because we endure it. We are death clothed in flesh, and we will not kneel. The chamber shook with silence, and in that silence the counselors finally understood the weight of their mistake, for they had not summoned a diplomat to humiliate. They had summoned a storm they could not control, and in his calm voice they heard the echoes of war, the memories of fire, the shadow of death itself, and none among them dared to speak further, for the truth was clear. Humanity had come not as prey, but as the deadliest force in the galaxy. The council chamber felt colder now, though no wind passed through its high walls. The banners no longer carried pride but shadows, and every alien eye fixed upon the human in the black suit who stood calm as stone. The weight of his words from before still clung to the air like smoke after a fire, and though none spoke it aloud, all could feel it. The tide within the hall had shifted. Arrogance was breaking into fear. The alien leaders whispered among themselves, their voices sharp and hurried, their tongues clicking, their wings twitching, their claws tapping against their thrones. Some demanded action, others called for caution, yet none dared to rise against the human directly, for in their hearts they remembered the fallen general who had collapsed without a strike. They remembered the silence that had crushed laughter into dread. They remembered the warnings spoken in a calm voice that carried more weight than any army. Still, the pride of the council was not so easily shattered. One leader rose from his throne, his body covered in armor made from the bones of creatures long extinct. His voice thundered through the chamber. We will not be threatened by one man. This is a trick, a deception, a show meant to frighten cowards. But we are rulers of the stars. We do not bow to shadows. His words carried defiance, and some cheered, though their voices trembled beneath the sound. The alien leader raised his claw and signaled to the guards. Dozens of them stepped forward, their weapons glowing brighter, their eyes burning with forced courage. The energy in the room thickened as they surrounded the human. The hum of their weapons echoed like the growl of beasts. Their claws gripped tighter, and the council leaned forward, desperate to see the illusion broken, desperate to see the human crushed, desperate to restore the pride that was slipping through their fingers. The human diplomat stood calm, his eyes moving from one guard to another, his face unreadable, his hands still at his sides, his voice quiet but sharp as a blade. I warned you once, and you did not listen. I warned you twice, and still you push forward. Must you learn through fire and ash what humanity truly is? His words cut through the air, and the guards hesitated, though they kept moving, pride forcing them onward while instinct screamed to stop. The weapons glowed brighter. Sparks of energy spilled into the air. The sound of crackling power filled the chamber, and many counselors leaned forward ready to see the human fall. Yet before the guards could strike, the weapons trembled. The energy flickered, and in a moment that silenced the chamber, every blade, every staff, every gun cracked and broke. The light within them snuffed out like dying stars. Their pieces fell to the floor with ringing echoes, and the guards stared in horror at their empty hands. The council gasped. Some rose from their thrones. Others shouted accusations. Some cried out in fear. Never before had their weapons failed. Never before had the tools that conquered worlds shattered in silence. The guards stepped back, their armor rattling as their courage dissolved, their eyes wide as they stared at the human who had not lifted a finger, who had not moved a step, who had not even raised his voice, yet had unmade their power as if it were dust. The human's gaze swept across the chamber, his eyes cold and sharp, his voice calm, yet filled with an unshakable weight. You believe yourselves rulers because you hold weapons. You believe yourselves strong because you sit on thrones. But strength is not found in weapons. It is not found in thrones. It is found in the will to endure, the will to rise from ashes, the will to never kneel. And that will is humanity. The council members trembled. Some clutched their thrones as if to steady themselves. Others looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Whispers turned to fearful cries. The arrogance that once filled the hall drained like water through broken stone, and the truth settled upon them heavier than chains. They were not in control. They were not untouchable. They had awakened something they could not command. One counselor shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. "This is impossible. No species can wield such power. You are lying. You are deceiving us." Yet his voice carried no conviction, no strength, and it echoed hollow through the chamber. The human turned his gaze upon him, and the counselor lowered his head at once, trembling under the weight of eyes that saw through pride and armor alike. The human stepped forward, one calm step that echoed like thunder. His voice grew colder. "You think you rule this galaxy, but you rule only because we allow it. You think yourselves masters, but you're only caretakers of a fragile order that can break with a breath. Humanity does not seek your throne. Humanity does not seek your crown. But if you strike us, if you force us, then you will see the fire you have awoken burn across every star you call your own." The chamber shook with silence again. The leaders no longer roared with laughter, no longer jeered, no longer mocked. Their pride crumbled into fear. Their strength melted into doubt. Their thrones no longer felt like seats of power, but cages that trapped them under the human's gaze. And in that moment, they understood that one man had shaken the foundation of their rule. The alien leader in golden armor rose again. His face twisted with rage, though his eyes betrayed the fear crawling within. His claws trembled, though he raised them high. His voice thundered. "You speak as if you were gods, but you are nothing. You are still human. You bleed. You die. You break. You cannot stand against us all." His roar filled the chamber, but his words sounded empty, hollow, a shadow of the authority he once carried. The human's reply was simple, yet it struck harder than any weapon. "We bleed, yes, we die. Yes, we break, yes, but we rise. Always we rise, and that is what makes us unstoppable." His voice carried no pride, no arrogance, only truth, and that truth spread through the chamber like a storm, filling every corner with dread, crushing every spark of arrogance, shattering every illusion of superiority. The guards stood frozen, their broken weapons at their feet, their eyes wide with fear. The council members gripped their thrones as if they were drowning, and the chamber that once roared with laughter now held only silence and fear. They had challenged a human diplomat. They had tried to break him, but instead they had broken themselves, and in their hearts they knew it. The deadliest force in the galaxy was not in their armies, not in their weapons, not in their thrones. It stood before them, in a black suit with calm eyes and steady words. The silence in the council chamber grew heavier with each passing breath, though no one dared to draw air too loudly for fear that the human might turn his gaze upon them again. And in that silence, the power of the council seemed to shrink like dying embers in cold wind, while the man in the black suit appeared larger than any throne or banner or crown. The alien leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their claws scraping against the thrones they had once believed unshakable, their eyes darting toward one another, searching for courage, but finding only fear, each of them wondering who would speak next and who would be crushed under the weight of the human's presence. For already the guards had failed, already the weapons had shattered, already pride had burned away, and all that remained was dread. The golden-armored leader who had shouted before trembled, though he tried to hide it. He rose again, his wings spread wide, as if to display strength, but his voice cracked with the strain of keeping it steady. He shouted that the council would never kneel to a single man, that no matter what shadows he cast, the council commanded fleets and armies, and the strength of countless worlds. Yet his words fell flat, for no one echoed his call, not one dared to cheer, and his roar turned hollow in the silence. The human turned his gaze upon him, and the air itself seemed to tighten. The leader's breath caught in his throat, his claws twitched against his throne, and the tremor in his wings betrayed the fear clawing at his heart. But the human spoke no word. He simply stared, and in that stare the leader felt every victory, every conquest, every lie crumble like dust. He sank slowly back into his throne, unable to withstand the weight of eyes that held the calmness of eternity and the coldness of death. The counselors began to whisper again, low, hurried voices filled with fear and doubt. Some demanded retreat, some begged for mercy, others argued that a yield would be the end of their reign, and yet none could rise to speak with strength, for each time their eyes fell upon the human, the words choked in their throats. They had faced warlords and tyrants before, they had bent kings and broken empires, yet never had one man in silence stripped them of all illusion of power. One counselor finally dared to speak, his voice shaking. He asked what humanity wanted, what this man demanded, what price must be paid to see him gone from their hall. His words carried desperation, a plea hidden in the tone, though. He tried to mask it with formality, yet all could hear it, all could feel it, the fear in his question, the dread in his offer. The human stepped forward, his footsteps soft, but each one echoed like thunder against the walls of the chamber. Each one made the counselors shrink further into their thrones. Each one made the guards flinch, though they held no weapons anymore. And when he stopped, the air itself seemed to hold its breath, his voice calm, yet sharper than any blade, filled the silence. Humanity asks for nothing but respect. Humanity demands nothing but peace. But if you deny us, if you strike at us, if you treat us as pawns, then you will see not one man, but all of humanity rise. And when humanity rises, nothing can stand against it, for we are not gods, we are not shadows, we are flesh and blood that refuses to break. And that is what makes us death to tyrants, and chains to oppressors, and fire to empires that think themselves eternal. The words rolled through the chamber like thunder. Though spoken softly, they struck harder than any roar. The counselors trembled their bodies, shaking their eyes wide, for they felt truth in his voice. They felt it like cold iron against their throats. And though some tried to deny it in their hearts, they knew it was real. They knew that this was not a threat. It was a promise carved from the very will of humanity. The alien banners that once hung with pride seemed now like frail cloth. The thrones that had been carved from stone of conquered worlds seemed like fragile shells. The chamber itself felt smaller, as if the weight of the human's words had pressed down upon it, bending stone and air alike. And in that crushing weight, the counselors who once ruled stars now looked like frightened children staring at a fire too vast to control. A counselor with silver scales rose, his body trembling. He cried out that humanity could not be allowed to remain free, that such a will could not be tolerated, that the galaxy would burn if left unchecked. But his voice faltered, for even as he spoke, his scales dulled, as if the light of his defiance had been drained. And when a human's gaze turned toward him, he sank back into silence like a candle smothered by the night. The guards whispered to one another, their voices broken, their courage shattered. One of them dropped his shattered weapon to the ground, and it clattered, loudly echoing through the silence like a bell of surrender. No one scolded him, no one stopped him, for in truth, they all felt the same. They all felt the futility of resistance against the calm, unshakable presence that stood before them. The human raised his hand slowly, not in threat, not in strike, but in simple motion, and the chamber stilled, as if the stars themselves had frozen in fear. His voice came once more, softer than before, yet carrying more weight than stone. Choose now whether you will stand as rulers who respect, or as tyrants who fall. Choose now whether you will walk with humanity, or be trampled beneath the march of those who rise from ashes and never stop rising. The counselors looked to one another, their eyes wide with fear, their claws twitching, their wings trembling. Yet none could find the courage to answer, none could summon the strength to oppose him, for they knew the choice was already made, the path already set, the fire already lit. They had awakened the deadliest force in the galaxy, and now they must face the consequences. And as silence once more swallowed the chamber, the counselors realized that the black-suited figure standing before them was not simply a diplomat, not simply a man. He was the living embodiment of a truth they had long denied. He was the proof that humanity was not weak, not fragile, not to be mocked or chained. He was the shadow of every mistake they had made, and the warning of every disaster yet to come. The chamber felt colder, the shadows stretched longer, the fear cut deeper. And though the human spoke no more words, the silence itself carried the weight of his warning, a silence that screamed louder than any battle, a silence that promised a storm yet to come. The chamber trembled as silence stretched longer than any battle, longer than any storm, for the counselors sat frozen in terror, while the human stood calm in his black suit, his hands at his sides, his gaze steady and unbroken. And in that gaze entire empires seemed to unravel, entire fleets seemed to rust, entire crowns seemed to crack, for no jewel, no weapon, no banner could stand against the weight of his presence. One counselor finally rose, his voice shaking, his hands trembling, his wings folding tight against his body, as if to shield his heart from the gaze of the man before him. He whispered that the council must yield. He whispered that survival demanded humility, that the galaxy itself demanded peace. But even as he spoke, he faltered, his voice caught in his throat, for the fear of saying the words out loud clawed at him. Yet the silence of the others pressed upon him until the whisper became a cry. Others hissed in protest, some clawed at their thrones, others shouted that they were the rulers of the stars, that they would never kneel to one species, that no matter what shadow the human cast, they commanded countless worlds. Yet their voices broke like brittle stone, their words turned hollow in the vast emptiness that hung over the chamber, for they all knew the truth. They had already knelt in their hearts. The human stepped forward again, his footsteps soft yet heavier than thunder, and each one seemed to shake the chamber more than the last. With every step the counselors shrank further, with every step the guards lost what little courage they held, with every step the truth carved deeper into the stone of their souls, until no denial could hide it. And when he stopped, the silence pressed tighter around them, like the walls of a closing tomb. His voice rose calm and steady, yet sharper than any blade. When he spoke, his words carried like fire through dry grass. He declared that humanity had been tested again and again, mocked and cornered and struck by powers that believed themselves eternal. And each time humanity rose stronger, fiercer, unbroken. He declared that the council had summoned him to humiliate him, to shatter the dignity of his people. But instead they had revealed their own weakness, for they had shown fear of one man, and in that fear their empire crumbled before it even fell. The golden-armored leader, once proud, once mighty, rose one last time, his body trembling, his wings drooping, his voice unsteady. He roared that the council would never kneel, that they would fight to their last breath. But his words rang thin in the air, and no one rose with him. No one echoed his defiance. No one stood at his side. His roar turned to silence as his fellow counselors turned their eyes away, unwilling to follow him into ruin. The human did not speak to him. Instead, he turned his gaze upon the chamber as a whole, and his words struck harder than any fleet. He told them that humanity did not seek war, humanity did not seek to rule the stars. But if the council forced it, if the council struck at humanity again, then every chain would break, every army would fall, every throne would shatter. For humanity was not strength of weapon or fleet. Humanity was will, the will to endure, the will to rise, the will to become death itself. When pushed beyond the edge, his words rolled like storm winds tearing through the chamber. The counselors trembled, their hands gripping their thrones, their eyes wide and wet with fear. The guards fell to their knees, unable to stand under the weight of the truth, and even the walls of the chamber seemed to groan, as though the very stones bowed to the force carried in his voice. A silver-scaled counselor broke first, his body shaking, his voice trembling, as he declared that he would yield, that his world would honor humanity, that his fleets would never raise weapons against them again. His surrender echoed through the chamber like a bell tolling doom for the others, for once one yielded, the rest could not resist the tide. Another counselor followed, then another, their voices a mix of fear and desperation, each one declaring surrender, each one swearing respect, until the chamber rang with cries of submission, cries that once would have been unthinkable from rulers of countless stars, and yet now fell like rain from every corner of the hall. Only the golden-armored leader remained standing, his body shaking, his claws clenched, his wings drooping. He roared again that they were cowards, that they betrayed everything, that they would destroy themselves by kneeling. But his voice no longer carried power, no longer carried weight, for no one listened, no one answered, no one cared. He was alone against the tide, and in that moment he realized he had already lost. The human turned his gaze upon him, and for a moment the chamber seemed to freeze. The leader staggered back, his breath ragged, his heart pounding, his armor clattering as his body trembled under the weight of that gaze. He raised his claws as if to strike, as if to fight, as if to resist, but his arms fell limp, for he knew the truth. He knew that nothing could stop what stood before him, nothing could break the will that burned in human eyes. The leader sank to his knees, his armor clattering against the floor, his wings folding tight against his back, his voice breaking as he whispered surrender. Though the word tasted like ash, though his pride shattered into dust, it was the only path left for him, for he had looked into the eyes of death itself and found no strength to fight. The chamber erupted in silence. Once more, no cheers, no victory cries, only the hollow stillness of rulers who had seen their own, and only the heavy breath of those who had bent under the weight of truth. The human stood tall in the center, his black suit untouched, his presence unshaken, his gaze steady. He did not smile, he did not gloat, he only spoke, once more his voice softer than before, yet heavier than the galaxy itself. He told them to remember this day, to remember the choice they made, to remember that humanity did not bow, did not break, did not fade. He told them that as long as stars burned, humanity would endure, and any who sought to chain them would awaken death in a suit. Then he turned and walked from the chamber, his footsteps echoing like a funeral march, his shadow stretching long across the floor. And as the great doors closed behind him, the counselors remained silent, their thrones feeling colder, their crowns feeling heavier, their hearts knowing they had glimpsed the end of their age, for the galaxy had changed forever. And in that silence, one truth burned into every soul, one truth carved itself into history, that humanity had arrived, not as prey, not as pawns, not as servants, but as a force that no council, no empire, no throne could ever bind again.